Good morning. Hope all of you are doing well. Today we're going to be learning Maseches Moed, Kattan, Daf Tes. We're starting about 6 or 7 lines down on the page on Tes Mid Aleph, starting with the words Udein. We were in the midst of learning a discussion about Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha, that one should not get married during Chol HaMoed because there's a very high level of Simcha there and a very high level of Simcha in regards to the Regel, and those two things should not coincide. What are the Mari Makomos behind this? How do we know that there is such a din of Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha? So the Gemara says as follows: Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha Minala. From where do we know that there is a restriction of combining two different episodes of Simcha? Let's just use this as our paradigm for the day of getting married. Just one Simcha on Chol HaMoed, which is the other Simcha, and that instead of them being overlapping, they should be one after the next. Says the Gemara D'chsiv, because the pasuk writes in regards to the Chanukah Samizbeach, he made a big party, and everybody came from all over the place. 7 days of celebration, and then that was followed by the 7 days of Chag, and that totaled 14 days. So had it been that it was we were allowed to be ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, says the Gemara, first long line, the isa de ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, had it been allowed, would have been much wiser to overlap the 7 days. We should have done one set of 7 days, and during that one set of 7 days, we could have killed two birds with one stone, not 14 days, just 7 total, and the 7 total could have served for the Chanukah Samizbeach plus the 7 days of Sukkot. Perfect. Everything would have been great. By virtue of the fact that we didn't do that, we therefore see that in Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha. Says the Gemara, V'dilma mintar lona trinan v'hacha d'isrami avdina. Maybe, says the Gemara, well, not necessarily. It could be that we don't necessarily save things to be overlapping, but we could have them overlapping, but where they do overlap, great. Like let's say that it had been that the Beis HaMikdash was completed a week later, on the 15th of Tishrei, then yeah, maybe we could have done it. Says the Gemara. Okay, fine. In short, we have no clarity from the pasuk no definitive clarity from the pasuk of Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha. Yibayle Shiur Porta suggests the Gemara. Maybe when they built the Beis HaMikdash, they should have left over a little bit of the Beis HaMikdash to build. And that way we could have had the overlapping 7 days. Says the Gemara, you can't do that. Shiur binyan Beis HaMikdash, lo binyan, shiur Beis HaMikdash, lo meshayrina. When it comes to the building of the Beis HaMikdash, it's not right to wait a week and to put the final touches on. You build it when it's done, it's done. So that's not nice. You're not allowed to do that. Okay, what if you leave over something for the completion of the Beis HaMikdash that isn't critical? Maybe they could have left over the spikes that they put at the tops of the walls so that the pigeons and the birds wouldn't settle there and then defecate there and make everything a whole mess. So it says the Gemara, you can't do that. We need that. That's actually part of the halachic height of the wall, is to have the spikes there. Therefore, one would not be allowed to leave that over, because even though inherently it's not valuable, but for the technical aspects of the Beis HaMikdash it is, because it helped with the height of the wall. Ella, therefore, we can't use this source. We tried to use the source of the binyan Beis HaMikdash, but what undermined the source of the fact that the Chanukah Sabayis was prior to the holiday of Sukkot was that, okay, but maybe had it been that it fell out that way, that they were overlapping, that it would have been allowed. So we can't bring a raya from there. Now let's try answer number 2. Says the Gemara 15 lines down, there's something extra in the pasuk. Michti. The pasuk says that there are 14 days. And in addition to the pasuk saying there's 14 days, it also says Shivas Yamim v'Shivas Yamim. This is grade school math. 7 plus 7 is 14. Why do you have to tell me all this information? 7 plus 7 and 14. Lomali. Why do I need all of this language? Shmami na. Hani l'chud v'hani l'chud. We therefore can see from here that when it comes to simcha, they have to be distinct and they have to be different. They cannot be overlapping. And that is what the Gemara accepts as a proper marimakom for Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha. The Gemara continues 6 lines into the wide lines. That year, Yom Kippur did not take place. They didn't fast on that day. So let's think about the math. On Tishrei, on the 15th of Tishrei, that is the holiday of Sukkot. 7 days prior to that was when the Chanukas HaMizbeach started, which means that it started on the 8th, which means that Yom Kippur fell out 2 days into the Chanukas HaMizbeach. And how do we know that it was acceptable that they did not keep Yom Kippur that year? They were very concerned about it, even though they had a very good svara. Let's get into the details. And they were worried, and they said, maybe the enemies of the Jewish people, which is a euphemism for the Jewish people, maybe they deserve destruction. So when they shared that concern, then a baskol came out from Shemayim to Amr Lahem. You did nothing wrong. All of you are worthy of entering Olam Haba. My Darush, what was the drasha that they had made to assume that they did not have to fast on that year on Yom Kippur? It says the Gemara as follows. Amru kal v'chomer. They made the following kal v'chomer. Uma Mishkan, just like by the Mishkan, which was a temporary makom kedusha. She'en kedusha so kedusha olam. The korban yachid doche Shabbos, and even the korban of an individual can push off Shabbos, can override Shabbos, even though the Isser skila, even though there's a very severe punishment of skila. Mikdash, when it comes to the binyan Beis HaMikdash, the kedushas or kedushas olam, which has permanent sanctity. This leads to some of the discussions of how inappropriate it might be to walk up on Har HaBayis, big discussions. There certainly are places you are allowed to walk, and there certainly are places that you're not allowed to walk, but there's big discussions about the severity of this. So they were saying that if the mikdash is kedushas or kedushas olam, the korban tzibur b'yom kippurim d'anush kares l'kol shekin. So then, all the more so, when it comes to Yom Kippur, which is an anush kares, all the more so we should be able to override based on the psukim that are required by the Chanukas HaMizbeach to bring korbanos and to do the avoda of that day. It just happens to be that the Chanukas HaBayis overlapped with Yom Kippur. So what do we do when the requirements of the Chanukas HaMizbeach of that week, they require us to bring korbanos, but it's also Yom Kippur that week. So says the Gemara, if that's true, you have such a good svara. Why were they worried? Yeah, you have it's not like you were guessing. You have a kal v'chomer. Yeah, ask a shelas chacham, and halacha was that way. It says the Gemara. Well, there's a difference. Hasan by the Mishkan, when a person was bringing a korban, it was tzarach kavua, but ha'achad tzarach hedyo. We were eating these korbanos. Says the Gemara, fine. So then hachanami me'ever le'avdu, do bring the korbanos, but mecha lo nechlu v'lo lishtu. It's Yom Kippur. Bring the korbanos. Fine, I understand you can do the shechita at the actual korban itself, but then maybe don't eat or drink. That would have been a good blend of the days. You've got the requirements of the Chanukas HaMizbeach. Bring the korbanos, but don't eat them, and don't drink any wine. Leave it alone. Just keep Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara, powerful idea. Ein simcha below achila u'shasiya. See, we had the mechanics in halacha to be able to bring the korban. But what are the mechanics of actually successfully fulfilling our obligations of the day? You have to eat and drink. It's part and parcel of the simcha. It's part and parcel of the day. And therefore, they were able to eat at that time. Says the Gemara, going back on something that we assumed was very obvious. How do we know that the obligations of the Mishkan, and the Mishkan, as of course we know, was Ein Kedushas or Kedushas Olam. The Mishkan had a temporary level of Kedusha. So how do we know the Dachi Shabbos? If you want to say that it's Dichsi B'Yom HaRishon or B'Yom HaShvi, that the pasuk says that they're bringing korbanos both on the first day and on the seventh day, and of course one of those days had to be Shabbos. No, Dilma Shvi the korbanos. Maybe that count in the psukim is only referring to korbanos, but not referring to anything else, but not referring to anything other than the number of korbanos. So therefore, maybe we should say it's B'Yom HaShtei Asar Yom. Ma Yom Kulo Ratzuf. Just like all of these days were continuous. So to over here, all of the days had to have been continuous in their korbanos, and therefore the Mishkan, the avod of the Mishkan can be Docha Shabbos. Says the Gemara, maybe it's only for the days that are fit for this, not including Shabbos. Maybe it's only weekdays. Says the Gemara, we can't assume that because on the 12th day, it says the word Yom as well. My Yom Kulo Ratzof all 12 days had to be built this way, that they are allowed to be where the Mishkan overrides. Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Maybe here too it's only days that are fit and not the day of Shabbos, only weekdays. Says the Gemara, otherwise we have two psukim that say biyom. Obviously that doesn't make sense. And because of that extra pasuk, we therefore see that the Mishkan can be docha Shabbos. What is the psukim that teach us that the mikdash, that the avodah on the mikdash can violate Yom Kippur? So that says the Gemara as follows: if it's because of the psukim that say it's the 14th day, like we saw above at the top of the page, the 14 days, maybe that too is only speaking about Yomim Haru'im, of days that are in Shabbos, of days that are fit for the avodah. Says the Gemara, no, Gamar Yom Yom Mehasam. We actually take a bridge from a Gzera Shav of Yom Yom and we bring it all the way back over to our case from Mishkan over to Mikdash, and that's what makes it permissible. And then, as we said, we had said that everyone heard a baskol, and it said that all of you are invited to Olam Haba. Says the Gemara, how do we know that they were given forgiveness, as it were, for that day? Says the Gemara, so let's analyze this pasuk to see how we know that the Jews were given kapara. They were given forgiveness for not fasting and for eating on the day of Yom Kippur. What does it mean to go to their tents? That they went to their tents. They saw that their wives were tahora from all of them. Smechin. What does it mean that they were smechin? So that they all benefited from the glow, from the glory of the Shechina. What does it mean? They were good-hearted. That everyone conceived and everyone had conceived a boy. Al kol tova, on all of the good things. So we have this part of the drasha that indicates, like we said, that there was forgiveness taka in regards to Yom Kippur. What is the rest of the pasuk mean? I understand when it says Yisrael Amo, that when it talks about the Jews, we just pointed out that they got kapara. That's why it says it was good for them. What does it mean that it was good for David? So the Gemara tells a story. When Shlomo HaMelech wanted to bring the Aron HaBris into the Beis HaMikdash, the doors were stuck against one another. They couldn't open the doors. They were locked. He said 24 songs, and the doors didn't open. He said the psukim and Sundays to him for Shir Shalom didn't work. And then you need to remember David. Then miyad ne'eneh. So we had said, why does the pasuk say that David Avdo also was in a good place? That's what the pasuk said. We said we understood why Yisrael was in a good place because they got kapara for Yom Kippur. But what about David? So we see here that David was the hook. David was the leverage point that got the doors of the Mikdash open for Shlomo to bring in the Aron. Therefore, we see that he was forgiven as well. But also, once they heard this, that this is how the doors got open, all of the enemies of David had a blackened face, like the bottom of a pot. Obviously, it's a mashal. They're like, oh, we see that David is now in the good graces of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Avon, he was forgiven. The Gemara continues 15 lines from the bottom, a little bit less, 12 lines. Rabbi Yonasan ben Amsai, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, Tanu Parshas Nadarim, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. They were learning Maseches Nadarim with Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. If Tormin Orta at night, they planned on leaving town. They were going to go home. And then Litzafro, but they ended up getting stuck. And in the morning, Hadur becoming through. And they came back and they learned by him again. They were stuck in town. Says the Gemara, Amar Lahu Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says to these two Talmidim, didn't you already say goodbye to me last night? So you taught us something. Talmud sheniftar belong to also a year. If there's a Talmud that leaves his Rebbe and then gets stuck in the same city, so you have to go back to the Rebbe another time and then say goodbye again. That on the 8th day, the people were sent out and they blessed the king. And this was the 22nd of Tishrei. And then on the 23rd day, the Chodesh Hashvi, Shalach Esa'am, that he sent out the people. So from these two psukim, the Gemara says 5 lines from the bottom. Okay, so that's what happened. Amar le Lebraim, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says to his son, these people are remarkable people. Zil gabeon delibrachucha, go and get a bracha from them. Okay. He saw that they were learning. He didn't want to interrupt them. Bittul Torah. So he's sitting there and he's listening until they finish learning. So here's the sugya they were discussing. Says the Gemara. One pasuk says, "Ksiv pales magal raglecha v'chol derechecha yichanu." A pasuk that references that we should weigh every activity that we are about to do and prioritize them, which mitzvah is greater, and then choose, which is not a simple thing to do. But another pasuk says, that you should not measure which activities you do. This is like in line with the principle of schar mitzvah b'hayal maleka. We don't know how to prioritize mitzvahs. We don't know exactly how to do that. So which one is it? So this is what these two Talmidim of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai were learning. So they said, when do we say that it's a mitzvah that's efshal asosai de'achirim? So let's look at Rashi, because Rashi here gives a beautiful explanation of this Gemara. Rashi says, in a case of mitzvah she'efshal asosai de'achirim, then tifales pales magal raglecha. You should weigh which one is greater. Sheta'aseh ata hagdola v'chaverecha yasu ktana. So if I have 2 mitzvahs that need to be done, and I can give one to you and I can keep one myself, so then I have to make a cheshbon, and I have to keep the bigger mitzvah for me to do. And then you can do malacha nasis de'achirim. That's what it means in the Gemara. And at the top of Daf Testament Bay, the rest of the parish of this is as follows. And kan the mitzvah she'ef sharla sosa de'achirim. When it comes to mitzvahs that you're keeping yourself, we don't weigh them, says Rashi. Mitzvah she'ef sharla sosa de'achirim al tefalei sel mitzvah sheba yercha ben gdol ben ktana aseh. Just do the mitzvahs, whatever it is. That's our obligation. So when it's all internal, we don't measure. We just push forward. We knock every mitzvah off that we can, in whatever order they come to you. That's what the Gemara says. But they weren't done learning yet. These two Talmidim, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, they continued. Top line, and they said, "Hadar Yasser come in by." They were talking about the following psukim. See, one pasuk says, "Yikarhim b'bneinim chol chafatzecha lo yishvu ba." Your chafatzim, they have no comparison. Ha'chefzei shamayim yishvu ba, but Kadosh Baruch Hu's mitzvahs are awesome. Uchsiv kol chafatzim lo yishvu ba, da'afil chefzei shamayim lo yishvu ba. There's nothing for you to even compare to in regards to chefzei shamayim. It says the Gemara here too. Kan b'mitzvah shef shala sosa de'achirim, kan b'mitzvah shef shala sosa de'achirim. It depends. One pasuk is talking about you being able to do all the mitzvahs, and the other spot talking about when you need help with someone who's going to be your partner in crime. Anyways, they finished learning the psukim, and Amrullah, the two Talmidim, said to the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, "My baisacha, how can we help you? What do you need here?" Amar lahu, he said to them, "The Amar li Abba, my father said, Zil gabayu delivrachucha, go to these great people and get a bracha." And this was the bracha they gave. 8 lines down. Amrullah yehi rava de tizra v'lo techtzad. May you merit to plant, but not to harvest. Te'ayel v'lo tepu. You should bring into your house and not let out of your house. Tepu v'lo te'ayel. Let out of your house and not let into your house. And then they said, Lichru beischa v'lesu ushpizach. Your house should be destroyed and you should become a guest. Levalbel pesorcha. Your table should be destroyed. Lo techse shata chadata. And you should not see a new year. Not exactly the most warm and fuzzy blessing that anyone could get. When he went home to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Amar lein, forget about the fact that they didn't give me a bracha. About tzu'urei tzoron, my gosh, they were so negative, they hurt me. It was very damaging bracha. Amar lein, my amrullah. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says to someone, what bracha did they give? They repeated the conversation, this and this. They said to me, Amar lein, hanach kulu birchas aninu. Every last one of these things is a bracha. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai went through the whole bracha and explained how each line is in fact a good thing. Tizra v'lo techtzad. What does it mean you should plant but not harvest? Tolid banim v'lo yamusu. That you should plant, you should have children. V'lo yamusu, and you should not harvest them. They should not be cut down, meaning that your children should live a long life. Ta'ayel v'lo tepuk. What does it mean that they should be brought in and not be let out of your house? Ta'ayel kalsa. You should bring in a daughter-in-law for your son. V'lo lemusu b'nach delifkum. And you shouldn't, your son shouldn't die to the point that you would then need to send the daughter home. She can't live at your house if she's not married to you, and she's your daughter-in-law. And if her husband dies, then she has to leave. So bring her into your house to marry your son, and then she should never leave. Your husband, meaning your sons, should be safe and well. What's next? Third of the way down, 5 lines before the wide lines. Tepuk velo teol. What does that mean? You should send out and then not take back in. Tolid binasa velo yamusu guvraihu velehadru levasach. That if you have a child who's living in someone else's house, your daughter lives in someone else's house. You don't want her husband to die, so that she has to move back in with you. That's another part of the bracha. What does it mean, lechu beischa v'lesu b'shpizach, that your house should be destroyed and that you should be but a guest? Says the Gemara, the alma ushpizach. This world is like an inn; it's like a hotel. V'ahi alma beisa, and the next world should be like your house. This is the temporary, the famous story of the Chazon Ish. Why don't you have nice furniture? He says, I'm just a traveler. So that's this Gemara. I'm only here for a short time, 120 years in Yirtzeh Hashem. And after that, that's when it all really starts. This is the pregame. This is not even the pregame. This is just a prose door. It's just a hallway. It says the Gemara. How do we know this is true? Kirbam batemu leolam, al tikri kirbam ela kivram. That's what the Gemara says about having the right hashkafa. Having the right hashkafa about this world and the next. Last short line, why should your table be destroyed? Your house should be a mess. If you saw what was behind the computer, it's a mess. So that's what happens when you have Baruch Hashem, when you have children, that the table is very messy, the house is dirty. How do you get out of this one? These two Talmidim of Rashbi, they said that you should not be able to see a new year. It says the Gemara beautifully, Delo tamus intach. What it means is that you shouldn't see another new Shana Rishona, another new first year with another wife. That your spouse should live a long and healthy life, and that you have no need for a Shana Rishona again. So that's what the Gemara says was the bracha. Says the Gemara similarly, although with different people, that there was a story in regards to another person who gave a bracha. Reb Shimon ben Chalafta was leaving the presence of Rabbi. Amar le libre, he said to his son, go get a bracha. Amar le, hey Rava, you should not embarrass and you should not be embarrassed. When he got back to his father, to Reb Shimon ben Chalafta, Amar le, Amar le, milin ba'almahud, Amar le, a little bracha. It's like a bracha v'hatzlacha, buha. It's a very simple bracha. You shouldn't be embarrassed and you shouldn't embarrass. It says the Gemara, Amar le, no, you misunderstood. He gave you a bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to the Jews. Oh, so this is from a pasuk. You're getting a very big bracha. The bracha that Rebbe gave the son of Rav Shimon ben Chalafta. It was a beautiful bracha. Don't embarrass and don't be embarrassed. What does it mean? That a woman in Chol Hamoed can do her jewelry. So let's see. There are 3 things that a woman can do, that a woman does in regards to jewelry. It's like eye makeup. She can part her hair. She can put this material on her face. It's basically a type of hair removal system that she can remove hair from other parts of her body. The wife of Rav Chizda was putting on her Shabbos makeup, putting on her Shabbos finest with her daughter-in-law. Yossi Rav Huna Bar Chinana, Kamid Rav Chizda, and Rav Huna Bar Chinana was in the house. I guess he found out that she was putting on her makeup. The Rebbetzin was putting on Yossi cover. Lo Shanu El Yalda, Aval Zakein alone. During Chol Hamoed, a woman who's an adult, she's not allowed to put on her makeup. Only a child is allowed. Rav Chizda snapped back, absolutely not. What are you talking about? Your mother, even your grandmother, even if she's standing over her grave, a woman is allowed to put on her makeup during Chol Hamoed. The Amri in shape, people say, Bas Shisen, Bas Shis, a 60-year-old is the same as a 6-year-old, the kol tavla rata, when they hear the bang of the drum for a wedding. Like what that's like at a wedding. They've been taking pictures for an hour. All of a sudden, you hear the band. They're warming up, and once the drum hits a certain rhythm, you recognize that the chassan and kala are going to come in. Everybody instantly goes to the floor. Doesn't matter if you're 60 or 6. He uses this as a mashal. When you're 60 or 6, still a woman wants to put on her makeup. Nothing to talk about, and it's absolutely mutter. No distinction between a yalda and a zakina. Next to that, 15 lines or so, 20 lines from the bottom, we're going to go to the last word on the page, and then we will stop. So that she should not put on this hair removal on her body. Tanya Rabbi Yossi Omer because it's painful for her, as we said the other day. If she's able to peel off the whatever she puts on her face, she can peel it off, that's fine. Because so because there's a long-term benefit and it's not as annoying as it would be the other system, which doesn't peel off. So here, this is to her benefit. As long as you can peel it, it's fine. Says the Gemara. Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold of this idea that as long as the simcha comes down the road, even though right now you're bitzar, does that work? After all, that's not in another area entirely. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Nifrain Mehen Mibnei Meitzar, that one is allowed to get paid by a goy on the day of their holidays, because when they pay, it makes them upset, and it's their Yom Edom, and that's fine. You couldn't pay them on Yom Edom, because then they'll say to their gods, to their deities, wow, thank you, deity X, because look at this, I just got money. So they're allowed to pay us, but we're not allowed to pay them on their holidays. But people argued with him and said, no, you shouldn't allow that, because even though they're upset right now, so what do we see from this pushback against Rabbi Yehuda? The Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of the idea of doing something right now which your mates are, which you're upset about, that down the road there's going to be simcha. And if so, how can you say that a woman is able to use this peel on her face to remove unwanted hair if we don't hold of this svara of sameach la'achar zman? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, you are comparing two cases that can't be compared. You're talking about paying a goy on Yom Edom to the case of Chol HaMoed. And says the Gemara, Hanach leChol HaMoed, Dekuhu meitzar achshav v'sameach la'achar zman. That's the whole nature of Chol HaMoed, is that we're doing things now. We're going to enjoy them in the long run, even if it's tiring. Fine, we'll be fine. So that svara Rabbi Yehuda does employ over here by Chol HaMoed, but the svara of meitzar now and sameach later, he doesn't employ in regards to the world of paying back a non-Jew or getting paid back from a non-Jew. Another answer is Ravina Amar, no, Nachri l'Inyan Piron l'Olam Meitzar. The Nachri, it's always going to hurt him to pay a bill. It's always going to be difficult, and he'll never feel simcha later. That might have been Rabbi Yehuda's sheet over there. One last sugya. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda ben Osi Shrash Gila Pirkat L'Gil Shana. If there's a girl who has hit certain developmental stages in her body, but she's really not old enough. So how does she take care of her body in regards to unwanted hair? Anios, the women who were poor, the girls who were poor, Toflos, sun deceit, they would use some type of lime to remove hair. Ashiros, the rich girls would use Toflos or sun besolas. They would use some type of flour mixture that they would use to remove hair. And Benos Malachem, the highest caliber, the 1% of the 1%, the daughters of the kings, B'Shem and Hamor, they would use what they used in the times of Esther. That the women in the times of Esther would spend 6 months, and they would take care of their skin, take care of their bodies. They looked absolutely beautiful for Achashverosh. My Shem and Hamor, we've had this Gemara a few times. What is Shem and Hamor? What is this oil of myrrh? Says the Gemara, Rav Huna bar Chia Amar, Sateches, it's an oil with certain additives in it. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Ami Amar, Shem and Zeshlo Shlish. It's very young olives and the olive oil from them. Then the Gemara says, Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer an pikinun. It's an pikinun, which is Shem and Zeshlo Shlish, similar. Lama Sachin also. Why were they anointing them with Shem and Hamor? What does it do? It does two things. It's a hair removal product, and it also makes the skin look beautiful. Double. Rabbi had a daughter, Tafla Aver, and he did this process, which was taxing on the body, but he did this process. He made sure that she was beautiful, and in the right way, in all the right places, he made sure that she was beautiful. So he did this process of Shem and Hamor with that double benefit of removing unwanted hair and making the skin look beautiful. And back in the day, there was a dowry paid, that if someone wanted to marry your daughter, so they would have to pay a dowry. And she was so beautiful that Shakalba Dalid Meazuze, that because she was taken care of in regards to how she looks with the Shem and Hamor. So Lamaisa was so beautiful that somebody paid 400 zuz. However, one of the neighbors picked up on this and kind of made a big error. There was a non-Jew in the neighborhood who had a daughter. Tafla b'chad zimna. Instead of doing what Rabbi Bibi did, which was aver, first with the hand, and then with the arm, and then with the shoulder, and then with the face, fine, but the body one aver at a time. This guy dunked his daughter in a whole container of this Shem and Hamor. Umesa, and she died. That's what she didn't follow the instructions on the box. Omar Kutla Bibi Librasti, my Bibi killed my daughter, Rav Bibi, who I saw that he did this with his daughter and was successful. But my daughter died from it. But this guy didn't realize that he had done it the wrong way. Omar Rav Nachman, Rav Bibi, the Shasi Shichra, Bayan Bante Tafla, Rav Bibi, who drank a lot of beer. His daughters needed these skin treatments. Anan Delosha Sinan Shichra. I, says Rav Nachman, I who don't drink beer, lo ba'inan banasin tifla. Says the Gemara at the very last Rashi on the page. Why is it that drinking wine would lead someone to this issue of needing to tend to their skin? So Rashi says, last Rashi on the page, ba'inan banasin tifla the sheikhar megadel sear ume'ave es habasar. Drinking wine puts hair on your body, it makes hair grow. Ume'ave es habasar, and makes the skin thick. So therefore one should, if you want to drink beer, that's fine. Just recognize some of the fallout, maybe that your children will be a little bit hairier. That's what the Gemara says. We're going to stop right here. We're going to record again Mir Tashem Motzei Shabbos, and then again Sunday morning, and then I'll be Mir Tashem back in person on Monday. Wishing you all a beautiful day.